Hello, and welcome to 10 Very Big Books, a Malazan read-through podcast. My name is Peter Bond, and today on the show, we're talking about Ian Cameron Esselmont's Orb, Scepter, Throne. This is the fourth in our mini-series covering the novels of the Malazan Empire, and with me on this whole journey has been the star of YouTube himself, Iskar Jarek.
Peter, what's up? This is going to be an exciting one. I've been pumped for this for a while.
Me too, and let me tell you why. So we were actually just talking. We were actually just talking about God Is Not Willing before we got on mic. But I told you, it's like I read the 10 main books. I read those 10 books, and interweaved in them, I put in the first 3 Esselmont books, and then I basically started the reread podcast. It's like kind of pretty much the timeline. And I guess once I started the reread podcast, I was like, well, I don't know if I want to go forward. And I feel that way about Carcanis now. I have this weird feeling. I'm like, well, maybe I'll want to podcast about these things. So if I read them now, what does that mean for the shit? Do you know what I mean? Yeah. But like now that we're here, I finally feel I was like so stoked because Orb, Scepter, Throne became the first new Malazan book I've read since, I finished The Crippled God 4 or 5 years ago or something.
Yeah, totally.
And I told you, I was tweeting about it. Absolutely loved the book. Had a fucking blast. It was such a treat, such a blast. It was a great book to come back into the new experience. So I know you've read the book before. How was revisiting it for you?
I forgot how much I loved it. I just had so much fun. I picked it up and it was kind of chunky. I forget how many pages. It's like 400 or 500 pages.
It's a little chunkier than the other one. Yeah.
Yeah. So, and I was like a little bit worried, but man, when I got into even just the prologue, it just was a page turner. And, I just started jamming through it, and there's no kind of dead wood in there. I didn't feel like, how some of the other books, there's always like the slog or the bits where you're like, yeah, that part's whatever. This part's badass. You know what I mean? It was just like, yeah, I'm into that one. I'm into this storyline. They go to Moonspawn. I'm into that, so I loved all the bits and pieces.
You mentioned the Moonspawn thing. Just one of the many times I was like surprised in the book, you know? And that was just like this feeling, obviously I haven't had since I've been in this reread land, where like you're making new discoveries when you're rereading the books, but it's like just a totally fucking different ball game. That like first time you're like, fucking shit, it's this thing,
Yeah.
Oh my God, totally. What a trip.
Totally.
I don't know. We'll get to working through the book more specifically in a sec, but what do you think? Maybe do you think just all of Malazan's better when we're in Darujhistan? I just feel like it's a soft theory I'm pitching,
No, I'm into it. I support it. I'm here for that theory because I don't know if it's because we're like predisposed to be Genebacchus oriented, because that's like Gardens of the Moon, and then you kind of go to Deadhouse Gates and it's all these new characters, you're freaked out, then you like come back to Memories of Ice and you're like, oh, finally, like something, I know these people, I know this place, the players and the geography and stuff. So it always just feels like kind of coming home, and you're just you feel like you have more of a dog in the fight because those are your people, right? And same with the characters, the people in Darujhistan, both sides, the actual locals and the bridge burners and stuff. You're just like, dude, those are my peeps.
For me, I think there's this element, I love Toll the Hounds, and I think Toll the Hounds is a very sad book in some ways, right?
Oh, yeah.
And it's not like the people in Toll the Hounds are having a good time in Darujhistan. Yeah. Most of them are like, really struggling to start a new life or something. But I guess compared to Seven Cities, Letharis, Kalance, like Darujhistan seems like a place some people are at least living and enjoying their lives, or at least having a good time, somewhat chill at all,
Yeah.
Like, if you told me I was moving to, Erlatan, I don't know if I'd be that stoked,
Yeah,
I don't know if I'd be stoked to move to Darujhistan, but at least, like, there's, like, a sense of culture. I feel like there's such a rich sense of place. I don't know. It feels like one of the most developed locations in the whole setting.
Yeah, and it's more mellow and stable, It's like, it seems like there is politics in Darujhistan, but it's kind of like the political, I guess Orb, Scepter, Throne's a little bit different, where it's more consequential, but just in general, it's like kind of like these nobles doing their noble courtly, shenanigans, whereas like the politics and all these other places are much more existential in nature, like what's going to happen with the, in Black Coral and stuff. Like it's like, that was all politics too, but it's of a much more consequential thing than just these kind of rich people being super catty about who gets what trade contracts. And so I think it just kind of lends itself more to just like the nuts and bolts of people getting on with owning a bar and trying to run a forge and do all that stuff.
Well, that's what I love. And I loved it in Toll the Hounds, and I love it here. That's just like part of the plot line is like, well, they own a bar. They're just hanging out owning a bar, and it's not like, okay, we have to go across 7 cities to climb the mountain and throw the ring in Mount Doom or whatever. You know what I mean? It's like, it's not of that scale. It's just like,
totally. They're just trying to get on with life. And it's like these, they're being forced into all these things. And it's like, that's not their ultimate goal. Their ultimate goal is to like chill and drink beer.
Yeah. And that's why I love that stuff. I've always loved the Berthol stuff. And I think it's how much I've loved Toll the Hounds, I do think kind of teed me up to love this book so intensely.
Yeah.
I think it has a few, I don't know. I don't think it's a perfect book,
Sure.
I think but I think the shortcomings I feel that are in this book are like kind of just shortcomings kind of in the other books or maybe how Esselmont's writing. But I do think it's I feel easily the strongest of the books we've read so far.
He hits his stride, and it's kind of like the best of all the little bits and pieces that he's kind of trotted out in the various books up till now. I love Stonewielder and think that's like a hugely underrated book, and I feel like we had a great chat about that one, and it's really good. But that one I would say is like the most underrated. I would say this one vies for like just being the flat out best, just because it's action packed and fun and hit some cool themes too, which he's not known for the theme stuff, but I thought that was in there. So
I'd love to hear more about what themes that resonated with you. I did want to touch. Yeah, well, no, let's go there. What themes are you cooking on?
I don't know. It wasn't super deep thematic, but I did like the whole, what's her name, Yusek, and the whole tracking down of the, the traveler storyline and getting low.
Fuck, the book's so good. Fuck, just remembered everything in the book. Keep going. God.
Totally. Yeah. And like, but that whole thing of like, she's kind of coming to grips with her own arrogance and being just like a total selfish person and starts to like really get perspective on life. So there's that whole thing of her kind of being a mirror almost of like the traveler side where he's like all super mellow, but then like comes back into the world and she's like so worldly and becomes more philosophical. I don't know. I'm not that good at literary themes and stuff, but I did think there was some stuff that got me, contemplating and introspecting a bit.
I agree. There is meat on the bone. Let the record show. Yeah, I just want to quit. Like, bro, the Segula being in this book and being what they are in this book fucking blew my mind. I mean, I just got to say, up until this point, the Segula are like, I would say essentially nothing, or like essentially, and I've always kind of not liked them for that reason, because I feel like they're just like, oh, they're like super badass and they have masks and they're this like, they got this fucking system. It sounds like it's out of a game or an anime or something, Yeah. But then it's like, here they come and it's like they step on the stage and they're just like fucking human and real, and they have this culture and like they have this struggle and they're all these different people and it's about this tradition, and then the way Dassum's interacting with them and then the way they come to serve in the city, it just fucking rules, kicks ass so hardcore.
Oh, yeah, I love it. This is the Segula book. This is why, and it's kind of detached from the kind of main arc so far. I feel like this is almost feels like a side story. It's not like super kind of tied in with Stonewielder and stuff, or even Return of the Crimson Guard.
Totally feels like it's, which I was glad for. I'm not a huge Crimson Guard fan, so I'm glad that we got away and are just essentially doing a totally separate thing.
Like, I think this could be a jumping off point for like an adaptation for that reason, because you could just show this badass Segula stuff and then start zooming out from there and go, oh, let's investigate those people who like own the bar in the movie, right? And then, oh my God, they're part of this like whole big thing. And you could like start zooming it out to the bridge burners. You could start doing that like with the Gardens of the Moon stuff, and like, because it's just so badass. The Segula are way deeper than what you hear up to this point, where they're kind of like window dressing. They're actually a really sad story too, right?
It's like they're like sad,
Dude, it's depressing because you think of the Segula as being like the epic badasses and that, it's the sword fighting thing, but it's like they are totally like, and I love that little bit when he talks about the last first, the guy who like put the blood smear on Jan or Jan's
Sure.
mask, and he goes, yeah, like it's better if you like don't know the backstory or whatever. And it is, because it's like here's these like noble, honorable, they follow this like intense moral code and whatever. Nobody understands it outside of their own thing, which is creates all this hilarious comedy in the books. But it's like they're like total legit stand-up honorable people, it seems like, and they're just being absolutely used and abused for these heinous things. And the whole Moranth crossover is just,
bro, I completely forgot about that. When the Moranth totally bro, awesome shit. And the Moranth up until now had mostly been like described, and we really never even saw them in fighting. It's just like you would hear about them, or they're moving the things, or they have the munitions. But like when that battle happens and they're on the fucking dragonflies, and it's like, oh man, just fucking metal, man.
And the dudes are just running up like 2 by 2, right? And they're just like, deuces, homie. It's just absolute carnage. And it's like you straight up brought a knife to an explosion fight.
And it's just such a well written sequence too. They really play this tension because it's from that, because all of a sudden you shift to the Malazan point of view, and I'm like, why are we here? Why is this the perspective of the battle? And then you really understand like when everything kind of goes to shit. So
totally. And like the whole dome being impervious to the munitions and all that's just like, dude, there's so much juicy lore and backstory. Like that's why I think even though it's action packed, the people who love all the backstory stuff and want to know about Bargas and Moranth, they're gonna love it.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's one of those things that it's something I've learned that is it's funny because I think some people are into Malazan specifically for this, just like the deep lore, just how these things, if you really want to pick at them, they're going to have all these weird connections and they're going to have all this stuff. I'm not a big picker. I usually just take it as I see it and I'm like, cool, know? But I was reading about what people's other experience reading the book, and I just learned a bunch of stuff, I guess, just went straight over my head during reading it. And I was like, oh, man, that's really cool. Cool,
That's why it's fun reading the stuff again, you know what I mean? Because I picked out a lot of stuff, especially Ice kind of lends itself to you going back to these like habits that you had before you read like the Book of the Fallen stuff, where you kind of are destination reading. You're trying to find out what happens because it is fast paced and there is all the fast paced, culminating towards something, and there's some kind of a big thing that's going to happen and whatever. And so, but there there is a lot of like just little kind of like breadcrumb and nugget references back to Erickson stuff too. And it's I feel like they did a good job of kind of connecting the dots. Even the little stuff like what's his name, Fist Kess, which was like a total small thing, and Steppen, it's like you kind of get some of those little linkages to Gardens of the Moon and other cool stuff. So
yeah, man, it's just there's like all of these references that clearly are, I would say, mostly pretty meticulously maintained.
Yeah,
I will say here's a mild pet peeve that I'm airing on this show.
Awesome.
How I think there's a lot of hubbub made about like how intricately crafted the series is, like Book of the Fallen, and like, and how everything's so purposeful and all this stuff,
Yeah.
And I think that's mostly true, but I also think there's just some stuff that's totally not that, and like 100% not part of some grand scheme, and just like there's also just a bunch of fuck ups,
Yeah.
And listen, I don't even say that to put them on blast. Like in my mind, it's like 3 million words. Like, of course, there's going to be a bunch of fuck ups, and there's going to be some words that aren't like a part of some grand scheme,
Totally.
I just think sometimes there's like a bit too much of a haboo made about it,
Yeah, some people want to kind of thrust them into ascendancy with their ability to like do all this subconscious dot connecting. I think there is a ton of that, and there's a lot of breadcrumbs, and you notice that going through and stuff. But like,
there is a ton of it. It's just not 100%.
But like, no, 100,000%. Because he said in his Facebook post, I don't know if somebody asked him, but he wrote a Facebook post, or I don't know if he wrote it and said he wanted to do it to F with people or what. But it was like about the whole net furrow thing. And like, there's all those like on the old Malazan Empire forums and stuff like that, there's all those people like trying to decode the net furrow gibberish from Toll Hounds, I think, when he like makes this big profound statement and everyone like is taken aback and quiet and it's like written as gibberish and people are like, oh, and trying to like, and he wrote and he's like, yeah, that was total like BS. He's like, out of that, he's like, you guys are like, making a mountain out of a molehill. He's like, that was literally straight gibberish. There's no like breadcrumb there. So you're 1,000% right for sure.
Yeah, just a mild annoyance, but I do. Now, anyway, back to this. So let's get on some of these individual plot lines.
Sure.
I don't even know if it's an annoyance. I just think it's kind of funny. Let's get on some of these plot lines and crawl through the book,
Let's do it.
So first we check in with a lot of the people that it's so fun. But not yet. It's like on the main show, I like host and I feel like I have to have this like, I'm like moderating or like I have this facade that I know what's going on. But like, I just feel like here, I just like don't know what's going on. A lot of stuff goes over my head and I kind of just enjoy the swords and when people turn into dragons,
Yeah. Welcome to my world, my friend. That's how I am. 90% of it goes over my head. If I can latch onto something cool, that's a bonus.
That's where I'm at. I'm just vibing, but on the main show, I gotta like host and all this stuff. It's like totally
this is
different.
Your kickback time, bro. This is like your free pass like vacation time,
bro. And that's why I honestly think I just enjoy reading the Esselbaum books more. I think first off, they're just more my bag. I just enjoy a breezier, actiony, more story.
Yeah.
And totally. I also don't have to do like this preparation for the show. I don't got to be like, there's not going to be 3 paragraphs about whether my whole life has been meaningless. And there's exactly. I'm just going to like chill out, read a book. And then, it's just a different stakes. It's a welcome change of pace.
Yeah. Agreed.
So we catch up with some of the different characters we met before. And we start, and Cole's on the council, and he's one of the first people. What you make of Counselor Cole seeing him in action?
I always liked Counselor Cole. I liked when he broed out with Ganos. I liked the kind of gushier bits of Cole from Memories of Ice when he's like being out with Marulio. I like this because it's kind of the progression aspect, because here he was, this like kind of broken man, alcoholic, right? Then he like found some purpose, and now he's like kind of this almost elder statesman kind of thing. He's got an elder
statesman energy.
Yeah, because you got Torvald there who doesn't know what the heck he's doing in the council and all that stuff. So he kind of like took him under wing for a minute there. But he's just like still the irreverent kind of trash talker too. And I loved like how indignant he was when he gets summoned to the hall and there's like that crazy mask guy and stuff. So I like Cole. He's just he's my kind of dude. He's like the kind of salt of the earth kind of rich guy that I can actually tolerate.
I like Cole, and I really loved a lot of the council stuff. We'll have to talk about the Legate more, but I feel like just a fun, great villain, loved him. Loved the mask, and then I love at the end when we get to that he's like reincarnating, and I guess like a Jagged from a past life, Just great stuff.
So good. Yeah, totally.
One thing, here's something that peeved me about Cole. Mm-hmm. I enjoy Cole, and I agree. It's really interesting to see where he went from Gardens of the Moon to here. Do you know what I mean? It's like you followed him on this thing. I will say, take Cole's relationship with Reba Orr. I enjoy this. It's fine, but I think this is emblematic of some of Esselman's shortcomings sometimes, where I feel like he's just gesturing towards a character dynamic we're familiar with as readers and consumers of media. Yeah. And instead of actually like fleshing out a character dynamic or establishing who these people actually are, it's just like, oh, you get it. It's this type of thing, Yeah. And I don't feel like I walked away. Like I was, so that was a frustration I had. And I don't think that's isolated to this. I think sometimes
it's like a template versus an actual kind of.
Yeah. And
it's
like
not that memorable of a relationship. So
and then there are these other characters that I think he draws really well, but just like, for example, hot take. I think he writes a better Scorch and Left. I just love Scorch and Left in this book, and I preferred them, Yeah.
Straight up. They're like some of the best parts. They're like, that's his, I don't know. I guess there's a bunch in the Book of the Fallen, but he's kind of like the Dathanar and Prazak. There's actually a group like that a duo like that in Erickson's new book too. But those guys are always like the fun aspect of the book. And I think he does these two kind of up at the top of any of the books.
It's just really good. Scorch and Left are so good in this book. And then at the end with them killing, it's just with the crossbow, so fucking good.
They're impactful too. They're like that kind of bumbling idiot that actually ends up like kind of being in the right place at the right time all the time and like bumble their way somehow like right into the mix of everything always. So
it's like absolutely perfect, and I also, the whole book, I was like, well, why are we following Scorch and Left right now? I mean, like, I like them all. I'm glad they're in the story, having a good time reading about them.
Yeah.
But then, like, and that's that.
There it is. Yeah, exactly.
So what did you make of the Legate? Did you, I wanted to put a pin on that. You enjoy the Legate as a villain? I really liked him.
I thought he was an epic badass villain. I love the like the kind of reveal piece. He's got like the kind of Panion little backstory a little bit.
Sure.
But I like how they were like these kind of gnarly purveyors of like super hardcore magic and like almost impossible to take down. They were like super OP back in the day. And there's all that stuff in the Moonspawn about, his rule and just the super shadiness. Plus it's just, dude, again, the ice stuff and this one in particular just seems like so adaptable. Like how badass would it be to see that like tomb scene, right? Where he's like, or even when he takes over like the Jesh and Lim character, it's like seeing the face mask kind of soul steel skull stuff would be dope.
Dude, the face mask stuff is so good.
Yeah.
I love seeing it.
A little grin, Perfect.
Oh man, it's just I can just see it in my mind's eye, and it's just a blast. I think he does a great job describing that stuff. And that, like, I don't know. I just feel like that's what I really loved about the character in a way, is I just feel like the mask is such like a thing. And I also, obviously a recurring theme in the Book of the Fallen has to do with like elder powers and these elder things that are like perennial and forever problems for mankind, be it war, or be it pestilence, or these things, these ancient powers that keep happening again and again, and these cyclical problems that humanity goes through, tyrants rising and falling,
Totally.
And I think the mask and putting it in that way about reincarnation, I think actually heightens that as a villain, and talking about like, the consolidation of power away from a council into an executive, to talk about the right hot, like, talk about a populist or talk about whatever, and I think it's just, I don't know, really resonated with me. I think it was, in addition to making an absolutely cool, badass villain, it makes it a more meaningful villain to me.
That's very cool. No, I love that. And I like wouldn't even have ever connected the dots on that, but I think it's badass because that's exactly what happens, right? Is that, and it's like kind of, especially if you layer in the context of like them having kind of withstood this imperial takeover, right? And they remain their kind of own little kind of republic or something, right?
Where they're a free city or whatever.
Totally, all to have it kind of stripped away. That's why I like the Eben stuff too, right? Because as with like a lot of the stuff in Malazan, it's like he becomes this mouthpiece and whatever, and is all like
so good,
but he kind of finds a way. And look, this guy wasn't like a great character. He's kind of a scumbag at the beginning, and like, what I mean, didn't want to pay his people, but like, he finds a way to kind of like resist. He finds some humanity, like, doesn't throw Spindle under the bus when he kind of caught him reconning in the thing before they tried to blow up the wall or whatever.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
And so it's kind of like that whole recurring theme where it's like, it falls to like the regular dudes to somehow find some cracks in these like super OP type of problems that they're dealing with.
Yeah. So let's talk about some regular dudes then. So of course you mentioned Spindle, and we returned to the Malazans here and the bar, and they got the basement thing going, and then Fisher's there, Diker's there. You got the whole gang. Do you any takeaways? How do you feel about the squad? Do you enjoy returning to them?
I love the squad. I'm a sucker for the bridge burners. That's what kind of originally wrote me in when I got into the books. I thought it was super weird, the like kind of Krull sex change reappearance. That was a weird little thing that they had to deal with, right? That nobody even like batted an eye that Krull was a old lady when they got attacked or whatever, right?
Sure.
Yeah, I love the bridge burner stuff. I thought we got a lot more of Spindle, I feel like, than you get some Spindle in Toll the Hounds, but it's a lot more heavy. It feels like they're like saving, dying kids and stuff. So this one was much more like the kind of Band of Brothers, kind of irreverent, bantery type of Spindle that I really enjoy. So it's kind of the more lighthearted version. And I'm a big picker and blend fan. Like anytime you get that kind of relationship aspect explored, I love that. I loved when they like when Blend almost kills Barathol, and then they're like, whoa, and they're like, like, hey, that's actually like we've done these crazy menages together. I almost killed you. That was pretty hilarious.
Yeah. I too agree. I vibe with almost everything said. I will add and build onto it, but I did want to quickly detract into the Kroll thing for a second.
Yeah.
Because funnily enough, just last episode, we were talking about Polil and, the scene when they're in the city and they kill her and all the stuff.
Yeah.
And I guess we were talking about her gender, and then I made me think about the errant, who I guess is also, gender canonically
fluid,
bi,
Yeah.
But like, we were talking about whether the gods actually had a gender, had a sex, if they were just manifesting themselves in a certain way, and we had this whole conversation last episode. We'll see how much of it gets to air. And then I read this, and the Kroll thing is there, and it's like, it really twists your noggin,
Yeah, totally.
About like, I've always liked the gods and how I feel like they're pretty metaphorical usually, you know, or at least they can be. Sometimes they're not. And it's just like, well, I guess all the gods are trans, fucking rock and roll, I don't know, but it's like, I guess it's cool. It twists my noggin and I like it,
I love it too. I don't know the answer, but there is like a lot of questions out there, right? Like even, I think in Carcanus, he's a woman for a while and then he's a dude again. And then here he's, so I think it is just a kind of, I think they even comment on it at some point about how
they talk about it in the book.
He goes back and forth and stuff. And she spent a couple thousand years and then goes back and stuff. So it's gnarly, but I love that anyway, just because it's like, just more kind of stuff to get you scratching your head, like what the heck is going on. And it really is that's not my area of expertise by any means, but it is kind of interesting to just see how he plays around with that, because Erickson does it too in his books.
Yeah, it's interesting to think about. And I guess I don't know, I would say trans stuff is not really talked about in the series mostly, so I feel like it's at least something.
I
don't know, it was an interesting twist to read about, and not even a twist, just an interesting
they just kind of throw it out there.
Yeah,
it's not even there. Like, I don't feel like it's any kind of a commentary or it's even really explored. It was just like, hey, Kroll's a chick now,
Yeah, and it makes
that's why it's interesting, because they're not saying anything, so it's up to you to go, what is this?
Yeah, and I don't know, honestly, I could talk about it forever. I'm very interested in these subjects, but it kind of makes sense in a way. It's like, I guess Kroll's transcended that type of thing,
Yeah. Totally.
So,
I like the Kroll stuff in general, of just the, whether regardless, guy, girl, or whatever, but just the whole idea of him like being basically dead. Somebody gets killed there. He kind of comes back, limited power. It's all the whole kind of relationship between people and gods that's still there that I always like to explore too. So it's fun.
Love it. All right. So to get back onto some of the Bridge Burner stuff, one of the few things I knew about this book before coming into it was that there were automaton robots in it,
Yeah.
And I have to tell you, I was at least a little let down in that regard. It's the only thing I knew. So I guess I just thought it would be a big deal. And it's kind of classically, it's like a very small part of the plot. That it's like, there's also a robot around, and that'll be around in the finale for a second, but it's not really what the book's about, Yeah,
it doesn't go a lot of places.
Doesn't go a lot of places. But I absolutely loved when they Home Alone the bar. And they like set up the traps and everything. Oh my God, so fucking good.
Adaptability, right? Dude, I'm telling you, there's so many scenes. Like, if my channel ever blows up and I make money, like, I'm going to take it and I'm going to like hire one of these Malazan artists to like animate some of these scenes. Like, even if it's just like a 1 minute thing of them like tearing up all these people who are attacking their bar, or like, there's so much good stuff, like the blowing up of the Segula, right? Like that. When they're fighting, or like Traveler, like when he totally punks that dude at the beginning who comes up and thinks he's gonna, take over, and he's like, get out of here, old man. Like, there's just so much good adaptable stuff. And the Bridge Burner stuff is the best. That bar is like home to so many different sets of shenanigans throughout the whole, just this one book.
Oh, yeah. it's like, I don't know, it's good. It's great that there's just kind of that home base in a way. I know we actually don't spend that much time there, but I feel like it kind of has that feeling regardless for the reader.
It's kind of like our Phoenix Inn, right? Because we were there from the ground up. Instead of like you kind of enter Darujistan and you kind of enter into the Phoenix Inn, which is already an established entity. This is one where, you know, that's kind of like our space.
I fully agree with that. Yeah, I do think there's something that the owner reads about it. Reader owns about it. So also, speaking of the Phoenix Inn, Rallick Nom returns in this book, but is a pretty small presence, I would say.
Yeah, he comes in and then he goes right back into the house, right? So he's barely been out of that house for a while. Then he's like, I'm going to go hide back in the house. So he spent like a good chunk of the 4 or 5 million words of this series, like either taking a nap or, you know, going to and from his preferred napping area. So
I'd say I pretty much never enjoyed Rallick Nom. I don't not enjoy him like I dislike other characters. I just feel like Rallick Nom's the epitome of the type of character who's like, well, guys, it's Rallick Nom. And then we don't spend any time with him. But like everyone acts like he's like a character we know and love, you know?
Totally. That's Ruth Ann Bad's like classic joke. He said Rallick Nom's claim to fame is that he slept in a treehouse for eight books.
Yeah, like I don't know, and then I don't know. That's a speaking about bugbears I have about this series. I also feel like there's a lot of things. Esselmont does this too, where it's just like I have no reason to care about this, and they're just telling me it's a big deal, and I don't think it's a big deal. But just then, like 70 people will keep being like, "Oh my god, this is such a big deal," and I'm like, "Bro, I don't give a shit. Like, let's get back to things I care about, or like make me care about this in a different way." You know?
Yeah, he's funny because he's like kind of the weak one in his relationship, which that's pretty badass that they got into a relationship after they got out of that house and all that stuff. But then he like kind of punts to her as being the representative of his family in the council and stuff. And then like her stuff was pretty badass, right? Like her whole relationship with their daughter and chaining herself up. That stuff's awesome.
Loved all that stuff. That's what it's going to go to next. Love Vorkan. Love her more. Fuck Rallick Nom. What's going on with Vorkan? You know what I mean? Yeah. I'm interested in her life. And Taya, the daughter, super cool. I know some people aren't into her. I'm really into her. She's super cool. Would love to just, what's going on with that storyline? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Let's do a whole mother-daughter book. I got nothing going on. Let's learn. You know?
Right. No, that's badass. She was dope in, she's like a good villain because in Return of the Crimson Guard, she was there shady and being all working stuff behind the scenes and doing all that shady shit with Lacine and stuff. But dude, I just love that mother-daughter dynamic, and she's just such a vindictive, terrible, evil daughter. And like Vorkan's actually like super badass and like
so badass.
I love it. And she kind of gets the one up, right? And totally like clowns her at the end and stuff. So that was pretty cool. But
I feel like Taya is the exact type of villain I love, you know? And I've started to learn, I was thinking about this recently with D&D games I was running, you know?
Yeah.
Maybe sometimes I enjoy an arch villain. Do you know what I mean? I just don't, maybe sometimes I'm looking at you, Book of the Fallen. The morally gray stuff is overrated, is sometimes my opinion. You know?
100%.
Like, don't get me wrong, I enjoy a good, complicated story. But do you know what also I enjoy?
Just being able to hate someone, right?
Yeah, I don't even hate her. It's just like she's a villain in a 90s action movie sort of sense. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. Like, she's just so obviously a villain. She just there's all these scenes that essentially are only there to establish that she's like a super badass villain lady and watch out for her, you know? And I love all of them. I eat them up. You know, they're more fun than some of the other scenes with characters who are like good and, you know, whatever.
Yeah, no, it's interesting because she is the unambiguous villain. You know what I mean? Even with the Leagate, there's an argument to be made. And I think Envy tries to make it like, hey, philosophically, you know, everyone's getting oppressed on one level or another. Isn't it better to But it's like with Taya, nope, you're just like, you evil girl.
No, I fully agree. It's like the book never seriously argues that, like, do you know what's bad? The democracy. Do you know what's good? Consolidated power in a single individual. Do you mean it's just like the Legate rolls up, and from scene one, you're like, this guy sucks. You know?
Yeah, you're like, this is going to be bad.
And every scene consecutively is just reinforcing that and then just like making him more. I just enjoy it. You know, having a good time. Liked both of the villains. I think there are, I don't know, there's a few other antagonistic forces, but I feel like they're the most villainous characters. You know,
100%. They're the obvious baddie of the whole book, although there's still like other weird stuff. And I actually like the kind of other, like, more morally ambiguous stuff. Like, I like the whole thing with Ansi and Malachi and all the, you know, other dude who wants to rob him and stuff, just because, like,
Well, let's talk about all that. So down, they're like doing this whole Moonspawn thing, which you don't know it's Moonspawn at first, I guess.
Yeah.
Which was like super cool for me.
It's like the spawns, right?
Yeah,
and you're like, wow, these weird islands now.
And totally fucking rips, is my opinion. And I got to tell you, I don't know what's going on in the rest of the books. I'm going to guess she doesn't show up because that's just how these books are. But what's going on with Orchid? The character I'm now the most interested in ever. And
dude,
what's going on with her, like Steve, Cam, stop the books. We're only writing Orchid stories from now on, is my official opinion.
I totally forgot about Orchid, honestly, when I picked this book back up, and I was like, holy crap, this, like, that's what I'm saying. That stuff is the bomb. How she's like speaking high tist or whatever, the old mother tongue and all that, like the whole shade thing of Morn, which there's like tons of possibilities of who that little dude is because he's been away for a long time and all that stuff. Like there's the kind of Draconis speculation.
Draconis randomly shows up too. Like, what the fuck?
Yeah, dude, straight up, dude, nuts. And like, but she like speaks the language. She can like, she didn't even know she was like a curled Ghislaine mage. And then she's like, oh, well, let me try this like incantation. Oh, you can see in the dark now? Like, hey, there you go. Like, oh shit, you've been mobbing around for like 5 days with this giant sword wound in your gut. She's like, let me see if I can say this thing and heal you. And then she's like, oh shit, I could have healed you a long time ago. It's like, she's just absolutely fascinating. And she always hedges. I love that too. She's like the smartest, most badass one. She knows all this stuff. And she's like, it's probably this, but it might not. She's like, it could be this, but I don't know.
Which is like a welcome change. Malzahn has so many mages that are like, you know what? I've lived for 10,000 years, and I know better than you, you mortal fool.
So refreshing. She's like a straight up regular person, second guesses herself, like has uncertainty. Imagine,
100%. And it ends in like she goes off. She's going to go off to Coral, I guess. And like learn more about Tistandi life. So like, what's going on? And the reason I'm so frustrated and I want to know so bad is I am 99% sure we will never learn about this character again. Do you know what I mean?
I hope you're wrong, but I can't say one way or the other.
So.
Yeah, it's sad. She's badass, and she gives off Datoran vibes because she's supposedly all big, too. So it's just like, there's just everything to love and nothing to not love about Orchid. Plus the name and how, like, Orchid is a Andy name and stuff. Like,
I just think she's an obvious scene stealer. Do you know what I mean? Like, if this was a comic book, I would be like, let's get the spin-off series about Orchid going. Do you know what I mean? Can we bring in a team of writers? Can I learn what she's doing? And
I love how they become like ride or die for her too. Like, he even says like, yeah, we were there, but now we're like basically on Team Orchid, and they don't even have really like a big agenda. They want to escape for themselves, but they're like, mostly we just want to be Orchid's bodyguards because she's just such a G.
That whole sequence is like really just, it is, I would say, probably the most, I don't know, the Kiska thing, which we'll have to get to, is also pretty detached from most of the action, but it is definitely just off doing its own thing in a way.
Definitely. Yeah, it doesn't have like it's not like he wings back around with some like artifact from Moonspawn and then that comes and is the thing that kind of squares the circle or whatever. It's just like, yeah, that happened.
That was also happening.
But it was dope.
Yeah. So let's actually jump into the shores of creation, whatever the fuck that means,
Yeah. The Veeder and...
Yeah, bro. Absolutely trippy stuff. I, first off, loved all of it. Was slightly annoyed by the Leoman mustache gag. It wore thin on me.
Yeah.
But overall, loved the whole plot line. Loved the whole thing. Loved when they go to the Temple of Drek. Super cool scene. And just, bro, it is just so trippy. I'm like, guys, what is going on? It's like all of a sudden we're next to the Ocean of Light. This is the Ocean of Creation, of course. This is the Veeder. Duh. And it's just saying all these things and it's coming at you so fast. And I'm just like, it feels like all of a sudden I'm in like a 70s sci-fi book or something. Do you know what I mean? It's just like, what are we talking about right now?
Definitely. You feel like you ate acid when you read these chapters and stuff because it's just like super gnarly. And there's so many questions too. It's like, how does it I so vibe with what you said because I have no idea. Like, this is like my third time reading this book and I, have more questions now about like, what is it, dragon blood? And like, how does this relate to the stuff that we saw? I'm like trying to do the Carcanus. I'm like this, Always Sunny in Philadelphia, like crazy, like conspiracy theory, drawing all these lines and trying to connect the dots. Cause it's just like, so abstract and it's like
100%.
some of the dragons die, but then he's just wading through, but he's like a mortal and a regular dude, but then like some of these gnarly like demons and other stuff can like totally get demolished by, I don't know, it's just nuts.
And Maker's there chilling out, like, I guess. What I kind of respect, and I've always liked this, sometimes it's frustrating, and I do think it has its pitfalls, but obviously, and it's like especially highlighted in this section where they go to the Shorts Creation Beater, is like, I would say the book is almost aggressively uninterested in telling you anything. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like
they're not in a hurry to lay it all out. It's not formulaic Sanderson where it's like this amount of this and then 20 liters of blah, blah, blah.
Yeah. Like I'm not like, I don't know. There's pros and cons to this type of thing. And it's just like representative of how I guess the two of them are approaching their storytelling in Malazan. But like in my opinion, a lesser author would try to explain to me what this place is or why it's important or like how it works or something, And frankly, I don't give a fuck. And but the thing is, I'm curious. But if you started explaining it to me, I'd be like, this actually sucks shit. I don't want to know,
Yeah. No, I think they're smart to not do it because honestly, like they wouldn't be able to, it's better to leave it a big old giant question mark and this enigma. And like, it's easier for them, I'm sure, because like, how, you know what I mean? Trying to get into the physics of it, that like kind of defeats the whole purpose of having this giant magical fucking hole in the world, right?
And it's really ultimately about Kiska and Taishrin, and that's like what anchors that whole plot line. So I don't think it hurts it. In fact, I think it's one of the best plot lines in the book. And it's the only time I've ever liked Taishrin in the series is in this book.
Yeah. This is the best Taishrin of all.
Best Taishrin of all, and the ending with him is super cool. Honestly, I didn't get it until I read more about it online, but it was super cool to read about.
Nuts, Tren. Yeah, totally.
Like Tren now, baby.
And so like, and that's what I wonder. That's why it's such an enigma because like you see in Carcanis, like the Veeder, is that like the thing that creates elder gods or like there's somebody who comes out who is an elder god? Is that like a process or is that just like happenstance? Like the dude's nuts. So he's like obviously immune to everything and just epic, even more OP, G'd up Taishrin than he was before. I thought Kiska was actually more interesting this time because of her own like internal conflict with herself of like, dude, am I thirsting over this guy? Like, is it daddy issue? You know what I mean? She's trying to like figure all that stuff out.
Well, it's like clearly she's like fixated on this thing. It's like, if I just do this with Taishrin, if I just can rescue him, then like, I guess everything will be okay. And it's like, she's obviously both pursuing that and interrogating what that question means and why she's so fixated on it,
Yeah. Totally. Because she had that like thing of idolizing him and stuff in Night of Knives, right? So she has this like whole kind of like predisposition of trying to like impress him or win his, favor or whatever, because she then wants to be his bodyguard, I guess, during all that stuff. So there's always been a kind of win him over aspect. And I just loved her trying to like figure out like, dude, what is my deal with this guy?
Yeah, I really like that plot line. I will say, we mentioned the Tren thing, which I guess technically the ending of this book with Taishrin, I guess, is the only reason some people suggest to read this book somewhat in the main series,
Uh-huh.
Which to me, I just got to say, is absolutely insane, bonkers shit,
I never have been a big proponent of trying to read stuff, even especially this, because like even the authors don't say read this one after. They say like maybe if you want, go publication order and read Return of the Crimson Guard after like Told Hounds or whatever.
I feel like I'm strongly at most Return of the Crimson Guard is where I'm at most.
Yeah. Like I don't get it. I think there's every reason to enjoy this after the fact because, and there's a lot of questions like you want to know all the Crippled God Endgame stuff first and then go into this, right? Because Kroll still has a piece of that, but like, because then you can start to ask what happens with Taishrin and like the Icarium stuff in particular, right? Because there's all the Dust of Dream stuff. So it's like originally Kroll's like heart and veins and stuff are the Warrens, right? And so he's dead now. But Icarium had that whole mechanism and all of his like coins and those new Warrens that he makes in Dust of Dream. So it's like, is that going to be Taishrin's going to be like the ruler over those new Warrens? Or I don't know. It's gnarly to think about, right? Because like Kroll is dead, so that his heart can't be Starval Demolain and curled Ghislaine anymore, right? Or so I just don't know how any of that stuff works, but it's like
That's
my
the
head's
exact
already
type of
exploding.
stuff way over Peter's head, you know?
Yeah, you know, and me too. That's why I love the Discord, because there's like somebody in there who's like, oh, that's because this and that and this, like Child of Honor, guaranteed explanation coming down the pike stat. But that is like the crazy stuff to think about, because there is all those new Warrens, and you know, who knows if we'll ever see those. I'm hoping they'll still keep writing.
Yeah, I guess we'll see, right? I mean, this
Yeah.
is our first time going. I don't know. I guess some of the ice stuff is technically like post Crippled God. So
Yeah, totally. I think this is like either contemporaneous or post.
I read it as more contemporaneous-esque. I don't know. It's hard to tell.
Yeah, maybe. I think Blood and Bone and Assail definitely are post for sure. Assail definitely. 1,000%. So I think this one's either right there or just slightly later.
Yeah.
But that's why I say, like, read it after.
Yeah.
Read the Book of the Fallen. Read the Esselmont stuff, and then go back and do all the prequels. For me, that just like you can appreciate them more. Like even the ice stuff, right? You appreciate all the references because you already read the Book of the Fallen. Would you have appreciated this as much if you
100% no?
You know,
so
yeah.
So I did want to touch on the Segula again. So we mentioned that where the Segula are kind of bifurcated into two different plot lines. First into the U6 stuff, when like U6 guiding them up to the temple and stuff. Loved all that. Loved U6 as a character, and loved having, because when we're from the Second's point of view, it's like we're in the Segula, and it's great to also have a stand-in for us being an outsider of the Segula watching the Segula, which is of course typically how we experience them.
Yeah, you get the inside and the outside, and that's pretty cool. I like Jan as a character, you know, such a like tragic character that sucks and like, you know, just gets absolutely crushed. And again, just like such a dope dude. I love the Jan intro scene, right? Where it's like that the third challenges him and he's like, bro, don't make me destroy you in front of all these people. Like, come on, you know, but then he has like no choice. It's just like, what an epic G.
Yeah. I really liked the second stuff. I really like how it ended with them with this mask, this like old mask, the clear one from the clear Darujistan stone. That was really cool stuff.
Yeah. And then Traveler becoming like the number one, basically, right? Like, and so he's going to go start up, which he was already in his own like clan. Like they were basically already worshiping him up there in those huts as a god, basically, right? Yeah. And then like, so, but he's like, I guess I'll go back into regular duty as a human. I don't know. I will say it kind of annoyed me that I guess they just like made Dassam like, why isn't a Segula? I mean, I don't know. It feels like it's a job for a Segula is how I feel, you know? Yeah, I don't know, but I guess it's like, well, and I think it's cool because he kind of needs them and they need him. Like he's just this totally like seems like broken person a little bit, even though he's like the stoic kind of wise elder statesman now. But no, I do think it really jives and makes sense on like a thematic level. And when you're there in the moment, it like you understand why and it's happening here. I guess it feels a little, I'm like, what's up though? Like, you know, they were perfect for each other because they're just such depressing, you know, tragic storylines themselves. So they can go and kind of all cry into each other's beers together and stuff. So it is crazy to think about what they'll do. I mean, like, just be super sad. Yeah, because like they are still like epic badasses and stuff, but then like the way that they just get so absolutely destroyed by the Moranth, like kind of, you know, it's like not just good enough to be a dope swordsman, like you're not going to be like a kind of global force, right? Because then like mages and people with grenades will just take you down. So I don't know, it'll be funny to see if they do anything more with the Segula now. I don't know what else you could do. Maybe they're just totally done. Well, see, I don't know. It's a good thing and a bad thing. It just, that's why I knew Orchid wouldn't come back. It's just like, I feel like my gut tells me I don't really know why we'd see the Segula again, you know? Yeah. There's no reason, which begs the question, should we ever see Dassam again? It's pretty much like... But see, I feel like the only reason we would see Segula again is now because Dassam's there, and Dassam's like, you know, one of the big characters of the world, you know? Maybe he's like reformed the society and but... Interesting. Also, shout out the Dragnipur thing and the Bolt. Shout out to Barathol. Just, you know, love that Barathol gets a happy ending thing. So good. I want to make a video called Barathol's the best dad in the entire world, because like that dude is just a straight up, you know, such a good guy. He's like zero resentment that his partner isn't kind of stepping up to the plate, or you know what I mean? He doesn't even see it as a fair share. I'm always like, dude, aren't you, you know what I mean? Like, you're doing all this stuff. He's like working all night and then doing all this, but he just like loves his wife so much. He loves his kid so much that he just like, and he just takes it all on the chin. And I was like, dude, what a absolute heart of gold kind of guy, which is like crazy because he's known as the, you know, the big betrayer and all that. And he's like still kind of, you know, so I thought Barathol is he's like a minor character in this book, but that was one of my like favorite parts because he's just like, here's this big old beefy badass dude, could probably kick everyone's ass, but he's like just this big old giant like softy, you know. It's like that's the type of characters I go for anyway. Is like
I love Barathol. He's just been introduced in Bone Hunters, and he like now they're just traveling with him, and he's kind of emerging as a character in the series. And I've always loved him, and it's exactly what you said. He's just like a badass dude, but really, do you know what he does? He just like is trying to like be left alone and do his job and love his family. Do you know what I mean? That's all he's trying to do. But like fucking people won't let him be, you know?
And he even thinks about like just going off. He's like, dude, I just want to like take my kid. He's like, I'll just go live in a hut in the middle of nowhere and like chill with my son the whole time. It's like, what a freaking bro, you know? Like, what a cool dude.
100%. And the thing is, usually in stories like this, like Barathol's like some, you know, guy, but now he just wants to live this separate life. But then the story's about how he's got to like pick up the gun again and go back and shoot the commies or whatever. You know, but it's like, no, it's like he returning to action is actually not a big part of his story at all. It's mostly about how difficult it is for him to move on and for like to make this new life or what it means for him to start a family. The story is not about him learning to be a badass again, you know?
Totally. It's like all about like, how can I, you know, make sure that I can just stay doing the 9-to-5 grind?
Exactly. Know? He's aggressively interested in doing the 9-to-5 grind, you know?
Yes. For sure. So, which is, hey, you got to love him, right? It's like, that's how you'd love to be, is like, yeah, sure, I sit behind this computer and do these spreadsheets, but if I wanted to, I could go out and kick everyone's ass.
Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, we busted through a lot of the storylines there. If I forgot any, you can let me know, but...
No, it was pretty tight. There's only like a handful of those really good storylines, and they're all kind of centered around Darujistan for the most part, except for the Red/Antsy. How long were you fooled that it was Antsy? I guess they tell us pretty early on, right?
Yeah, I was fairly fooled because I said I'm pretty dumb. So, but it was great when I found out, you know?
I never was that keyed in that Antsy had red hair. I don't know if I just wasn't paying attention. I knew he was kind of just like, I was more attitudinally connected to him as just being the kind of butt of all the jokes that Picker and Blend used to do.
Yeah,
versus like,
I was not like he's a big red-haired guy, you know?
He's a ginger. Yeah, no, I didn't remember that. So
yeah, I got to say, there's so many soldiers, a lot of their features blend together. You know, that one's... You know,
yeah, you remember them collectively for their dynamic. There's like groups that have a certain dynamic and stuff.
Yeah, so you remember them in pairs or in this, you know, whatever. I will say I want to talk about the ending a bit. You know, I think part of the reason I think the book's so successful is to contrast it against Return of the Crimson Guard, a book I like, but I characterized as being pretty messy. You know. Yeah. I think Return of the Crimson Guard has so much on its plate. And when it comes to its ending, it's really trying to do this huge come together type of thing that most of the Book of the Fallen books do. And I think what kind of is really effective about this is the ending of this book, I would say, does have like a culmination, you know?
Yeah.
But I don't feel like it's trying to be this. It's like a culmination of a few of the storylines, and then some of the other storylines or this other thing. I don't know. I just think the ending's really strong because it's not trying to do everything.
Totally. It just like kind of closes the story. It was like, hey, there was this like big force that came to take over and change everything. And then here's how it ended up. And like, you know, you kind of see it from a couple different angles, but it's just like a boop, button it up, call it a day. And you get that kind of closure and catharsis and stuff. And then, like you said, it just kind of closes the story that the book starts to tell in the prologue, I think, which is kind of cool.
Yeah. I feel like that's why I feel like this is probably the most successful book for me, is because I feel like, so like, here's the thought I have about the main series. I call it that. We know about how we feel about that phrase, but it is what it is. Like, the Book of the Fallen, I think, is a series that succeeds, but is like its ambitions are incalculable. And
100%.
So, and probably to its death, like it isn't going to do it because what it wants to do is like an impossible thing. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like it's just like it's really hard to write 3 million words that are going to do all of this. Do you mean it's like a huge task? I think it's a pretty successful series, just like its ambitions are huge.
Oh yeah.
And I feel like this book to me succeeds so much because I feel like just the ambition is like it's just shooting to tell a smaller story in a way. And I think it lands it much better and it resonates. And I think it's well written, you know?
Yeah, no, I think you're absolutely right. He goes out and he sets out to do something. He wants to tell the tale of these, you know, this place, this group of people. He wants to tell the Segula backstory and just the kind of broader Genabacus story. And he tells it and he finishes it, right? And he did, you know, achieves what he set out to do, and he does so in a kind of fun, you know, lasers, fireballs, all kinds of crazy, super badass and actually cohesive way. They all kind of like fit together. They're all kind of like, you know, different camera angles on basically the central action with the exception of the antsy stuff, which like you said is kind of out there on its own, but then still just kind of fun. So it's just kind of like you get a 360-degree view of this kind of bigger narrative set of events that are all happening in this chronology. So
here's an almost insane take. I feel like part of the appeal of the Darujhistan setting, as we were talking about, is there's like a slice of life element to it. Do you mean? Mm-hmm. I don't really feel like I'm reading a plot or a story. It's just like, well, here's what's going on in the city. And like the thing is, and I don't know why I think that. I have no idea, because I got to tell you, obviously there's a whole plot. There's a villain. There's all these heroes, you know,
right.
Like there's in both. I mean, Toll the Hounds ends with the whole fucking thing, you know, but I don't know, something there's something inherently mundane to it about it. And I think that's what I feel like grounds me and makes me feel like this story is just about everyday life and not like about, I don't know, the end of the world and metaphors, you know.
Totally. For the most part, the characters are everyday people, right? It's not like Memories of Ice where it's like you're constantly going back and forth from a whiskey jack to a Kaladin brood, like all these, you know, people of huge consequence and so you know, contemplative and philosophical. It's like, this dude's a bartender. This guy works at a job in a forge, right? Like
sure.
even Humble Measure, who's like this crazy kind of manipulator, pulling all these strings behind the scenes. He's just like a dude working. He's like works behind his desk. You know what I mean? It's not like there's all these crazy, mythical, gnarly people, with the exception of like the 12 demons or whatever.
Sure, there's a few, but it's funny you mentioned Humble Measure to kind of sidetrack in a way, but you know, I had obviously only seen Humble Measure and Toll the Hounds. And in that book, he plays such a weird role. Do you mean? I almost feel like he plays like a Lucifer-esque role. Do you mean? Like, he's just like this shadowy figure. He like is standing for running away from your past for these bridge burners, you know? And like, he's just kind of this shadowy puppet master that doesn't really get resolved at all.
Totally. You don't know what his kind of goal is, right? What's his agenda and all that. It's just he's just a sketchy, weird, hard to figure out dude.
Yeah, I think he's mostly serving that symbolic role, right? And it's kind of weird for him here to be like kind of just like a dude, you know? And especially then when he's like pissed at Lim for like quasi betraying him, whatever, you know what I mean?
He's like, oh, I thought we were going to go against the Malazans. Now you're going for total world domination, bro.
Yeah. And it's like, this is such like a petty human concern, you know, and it's so kind of funny. It's like, it's such a heel turn from what Toll the Hounds is like, you know?
I know. He's just a weird character in general, because it's like he's just on like such a crazy like Crimson Guard-esque mission for some reason, you know, but it's like, but he's this like totally rich dude. Like everything's going pretty good for him. I don't know. I don't totally get the same like deep-seated kind of deal where he's like such a driven to this objective. I don't know.
Sure. Yeah.
He's not the best villain. He's just kind of a weird side dude to me.
I agree. I think he's an interesting presence in Toll the Hounds. He's like kind of a quasi-villain, I would say, but I don't know. Villain's a word. Yeah. But anyway, so listen, that's a whole bunch of thoughts about Orb Scepter Throne. I wonder if you have anything you want to put the pin in, closing thoughts about the book, about our conversation, revisiting it.
No, I'm just really excited to keep going. There's a lot of cool, you know, Blood and Bones, a weird one. So it's going to be interesting to hear what you say about that. But then I'm really excited to finish off the series, because I think all the stuff that you like about Orb Scepter Throne is going to be a lot of the stuff that you like in a sale with the closure and the fact that he just kind of is able to put a bow on all this stuff and so that we can get our Kyle fix back going again. That'll be exciting. So it's been a lot of fun, but I think, people are going to be pumped to read this because, obviously everyone listening to this already read it because we just spoiled everything. But it's like, I think where he, again, finds his sea legs and like takes the best of everything that he's done in the other 3 books up to this point and is able to kind of put them all together into a nice little finished product here.
Yeah, I mean, did it with a lot of what you said. I think, as I said before, easily the best out of these 3 Esselmont books I've read so far.
Yeah,
I would say not even. And it's not even I don't like those books. I just feel like that's how strongly I feel about this book. I feel like it's not 100%. Even a competition. And I'm just stoked to be reading new Malazan books in a way and to be having that type of surprise again. So I'm, I've always heard mixed things about Esselmont in general and mixed things about Blood and Bone. I know people don't like that book, I feel.
You're either a love it or a hate it. I think it's polarizing for sure.
So I'm interested to see what I feel, but I gotta say, I know everyone, I would say it's funny because obviously this is a big Malazan show. You're a big Malazan YouTuber. And like pretty much everyone who's listening to the show is probably a big Malazan fan,
Right.
But I guess some part of me still feels like I'm taking a contrarian position by saying this book's really good and Esselmont's really good. And I know it's not that contrarian because I'm in like a room full of Malazan fans, But
yeah, but he doesn't get the same level of like love and devotion that Erickson seems to get. And he kind of always seems to be playing second fiddle in the fandom, like in the Facebook groups and stuff like that. So I feel you. I'm happy. That's why I love doing the series with you, honestly, because it's like shining a spotlight, especially in this one where it's really well deserved because he knocked this one out of the park. So like you kind of explain away some of the other stuff. Like, yeah, but you get good lore and Return of the Crimson Guard. You get to find out a lot of backstory. And like this one, you don't have to explain anything. It's just straight up legit good.
That's exactly it. This is the first book. I feel that way about Malazan. If someone asked me about Malazan, I would honestly have a very hedging answer about whether they would like to read it or not,
Right.
Because it really would depend.
You gotta be ready for this, it's that. You got all this hardcore stuff, it's contemplative.
But then there's like these books in Malazan. Like if someone asked me whether they should read Memories of Ice, I'd like, there's no, I'm just like, you'd have a great time, read the book, no questions asked. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And but like, that's a separate question in the whole series, right? But that's a separate thing. But this is all to say, this is the first book of Esselmont's I would unequivocally recommend 100%. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I really like Return of the Crimson Guard, but if someone asked me if they should read it, I'd be like, I don't know.
Yeah.
Like, think about these things and then make a decision. Where this book, full stop, check it out, awesome book, 10 out of 10, great time, would recommend.
Yeah, exactly. They ask you do a cartwheel, you do a little dance, and you hand them the book.
I'm like, check it out. There's a fucking robot in it and like a bunch of other cool shit, bro. You're going to have a good time.
Straight up, yeah.
So honestly, it makes me excited to read Blood and Bone. I know I mentioned people's reputation about it, but I don't know. I'm so hot on it right now, and it makes me excited to read more about other Esselmont books, because I feel like he's grown so much in these first 4. I'm like, makes me curious about what Path to Its Ascendancy's like, or these other things, So
yeah.
Very curious.
It's going to be a rip-roaring time, my friend. It's been fun, and it's gonna be even more fun as we go deeper. So I'm excited.
Well, thanks so much for being on the show today. If you don't subscribe to Iskar Jarek's channel, you can find him at youtube.com/IskarJarek.
Yep.
And check it out. Puts up a lot of great Malazan videos, and I think he's just putting out some videos about God Is Not Willing. That'll be out soon.
Yep.
And let us know what you think of the show. We're 10 Very Big Books on Twitter and Gmail. And we'll be back in about a month or 2 months to talk about book 5 of the novels of the Malazan Empire, Blood and Bone.
Woot.
I actually know nothing about that book. I know they go to a jungle continent. This is all I know.
Jacuruku. Yeah.
We're going to the Jacuruks.
That's right. Yeah, it's going to be dope. And you like Toll the Hound, so it's going to be fun.
I have to tell you, I've always resented Jacuruku because its name sucks shit, and I hate saying its name, and it's tough name. Tough name.
Yeah, totally. Well, that's like the place that they burned to the ground in the Memories of Ice prologue. So
yeah, just destroy it. All right. Well, I look forward to talking to you again, Iskar, and thanks for listening, everyone.
See ya.
Hello, everybody. AJ here, producer and editor of 10 Very Big Books. Thank you so much for listening to the 4th episode of Discussions of the Malazan Empire. A special shout out as well to Iskar Jarek for taking this journey with Peter. It's always great to have him on the show. You can check Iskar out on YouTube, youtube.com/Iskar Jarek. He also has a Discord server, subreddit, Facebook page, Patreon, and merch store, all of which will be linked in the show notes. If you'd like to join the 10 Very Big Books Discord, you can head on over to bit.ly/VBB Discord. That's capital V, capital B, capital B, capital D, Discord. That link will also be in the show notes, along with the link to our Patreon, patreon.com/10 Very Big Books, if you'd like to support the show there. This series and all of our bonus content is made possible by our wonderful patrons, so thank you all so much for allowing us to do more and continue to grow the show. Of course, I want to thank my good friend Bokeh for allowing us to use his song Winter off the album Demos and Singles 2016 to 2020. You can follow him on Twitter at Brendan Bigley and check out his podcast that I also produce over on intothecast.online. And finally, a huge, gigantic thanks to our romper connoisseur, Scout Wilkinson, for making our absolutely incredible episode art. You can check out more of her work on Twitter at HumbleGoat and maybe even get a commission of your own on her coffee page, ko-fi.com/HumbleGoat. All of those links, of course, will be in the show notes, and Pete and Iskar will be back in a couple of months with the next discussions of the Malazan Empire, where they will be talking about Blood and Bone by Ian Cameron Esselman. I'll talk to you then, and thank you so much for listening.